Welcome to the Not Old Better Shows on radio and podcast. The show covering all things health, wellness, culture, and more. The show for all of us who aren't old, we're better. Each week, we'll interview superstars, experts, and ordinary people doing extraordinary things, all related to this wonderful experience of getting better, not older. Now, here's your host, the award-winning Paul Vogelzang.
Welcome to the Not Old Better Show Art of Living interview series. I'm Paul Vogelzang, and today's episode is brought to you by Acorns. Acorns is a financial wellness app that makes it easy to start saving and investing for your future. Check out acorns.com/NOB. More will be in our show notes. As you listen to the beautiful theme music that plays softly underneath here, let's talk about something many of us face, but rarely say out loud: getting dumped. After decades together, the shock, the empty chair at breakfast, the ache that feels like it might stop your heart. Suzy Hopkins has been there. After a 30-year marriage ended without warning, she found herself asking the questions so many in our audience have asked: how do I take the first step? What now? Who am I? And who am I on my own? From the beloved mother-daughter team behind What to Do When I'm Gone, Suzy and her daughter, New Yorker illustrator Hallie Bateman, return with What to Do When You Get Dumped, a poignant, funny, and beautifully drawn guide to unbreaking your heart. The book counts down from the moment you get the news, minute by minute, day by day, offering practical steps and tender reminders. Set boundaries with the phone and with the past. Eat something warm. Call a friend. Take a walk. Try the small thing that makes you feel just a little more you. It's lighthearted without letting you off the hook for feeling everything, and it's deeply consoling, insisting you are still worthy of lasting love, especially the kind you give yourself. Today, with Suzy Hopkins, we'll talk about reclaiming space and time, how humor can sit right next to sorrow, and the quiet, brave rituals that rebuild a life at 50, 60, 70, and beyond. If you've ever wondered how to start again, this is the conversation for you. This is the Not Old Better Show, Art of Living interview series. Our guest is Suzy Hopkins. I'm your host, Paul Vogelzang. Join us for a wonderful interview with author Suzy Hopkins right now. Author Suzy Hopkins, welcome to the program.
Thank you. So happy to be here.
Well, it's nice to talk to you, too. I'm really looking forward to talking about this wonderful book, What to Do When You Get Dumped. You've written it. Your daughter, Hallie Bateman, has illustrated it. It's just a beautiful book. Thank you so much for sharing it with me. And, you know, I really just kind of want to jump right in if we can. You kind of ready to go
Sure.
today?
I'm ready to go.
Well, the book is filled with humor and compassion, but, you know, its title, breakups, it's heartbreak and often that can be overwhelming, regardless of where you are in life. What really motivated you to write a book that's kind of lighthearted? The illustrations are equally lighthearted at moments, but it's such an emotional topic.
Well, I think it's a book I had to write.
Huh?
My daughter is an illustrator and also a writer, and we had written a book together called What to Do When I'm Gone.
Yep.
That came out in 2018, and I was dumped shortly before we began publicizing that book. And
Right.
What motivated me was my husband suddenly left a 30-year marriage and one day told me that he was in love with his old girlfriend from 30 years prior and then was gone. So by that evening, my life as I knew it had shifted. And and I did many attempts to heal myself, going to counseling, et cetera, walking a million miles out in the fresh air, whatever you do to try to get through. And it just wasn't getting me to a place of healing. I go, why am I struggling? And I came to feel that heartbreak was really an underappreciated pain, the end of a romantic and whether it could be an intense, shorter relationship, but our lives were so entwined. It was a level of heartbreak I never anticipated and had a lot of trouble coming to grips with. So my lack of healing led me to write the book to kind of try to struggle my way through how is it that I am going to make sense of what's happened to me and how am I going to go on and build a new life, because I didn't find anything in the literature on breakups at the time. I think there's a lot more now, but I didn't find anything that was helpful to my situation. And and I heard a lot of, "Gosh, you're not over that yet." Yeah,
Mm.
people really get tired of hearing how heartbroken you are, and they're just bored by it pretty quickly. And yet, your grief has its own timetable. So I wrote the book as a way to try to make sense of it. Really,
Well, and thank you. Thanks for that lovely touching answer. I can tell just by the tone of your voice that this is all powerful stuff. Still, with regard to the book, absolutely, but also your candor, and you mentioned, this applies to shorter term relationships
right,
as well as longer, even later in life relationships. So many in our audience that, they might be navigating some of these great changes. Divorce might be one,
right,
widowhood might be another. What
right.
what advice would you give specifically to those of us that are over age 50 that might get dumped?
Everything that came to me in the course of understanding what I needed to do for myself was about taking care of myself in ways that were important to me. And I think a lot of us, we care for other people, we care for our jobs, we care for our workplace, we are carers in the world, and sometimes to the neglect of our bodies and our spirit. And I think that that was the case with me. I had a business that I was very busy with, and I just didn't take very good care of myself. And when my husband left, I realized that I needed to sort of create a new relationship with myself in which I deemed myself someone worthy of care. And so taking steps to what do you want now that your life has changed, because everything changes for us and you have to constantly adapt. And that's particularly true as we get older because of more death experiences and more significant, disability and other losses that we encounter. And this adaptability it requires of us is challenging.
Particularly challenging today because of social media and all of this ability to connect, especially with an ex, at just kind of one click away. How do we create some of that distance, that emotional distance, perhaps, in a healthy way, even in an era of social media when we are all just so connected? And how do we do that without feeling so isolated too? Because you can cut everybody off, or you can include everybody.
Well, I can only say what worked for me, because my big learning experience was that you have to come to grips with this in a way that works for you. And what worked for me was, in fact, isolation to an extent.
Yeah.
I had to, my ex-husband really wanted to stay connected, and it was too painful for me to see another person in the picture. So for me, I had to, I wanted to put up boundaries on every level. So I had zero contact. And in fact, until recently, hadn't seen or talked to him, because I needed to go through the amount of time it took to weather that pain, to where I could not be triggered by it, and I could have some perspective. And it took me. I think it takes longer than people expect. And I think hard boundaries are a way of self care. And that might be you're not on your phone and you disconnect from any contacts. I actually um, moved away from some friendships that were too close to him in order to not be put in that position. So, I just made changes that worked for me, and it was healthy to learn and to practice putting boundaries up.
In addition to the the boundaries, you really, through the book and in my research of you and your work, you really allowed yourself to feel. And again, I can hear this in your voice. There's a tenderness about you. So many in my audience, I think me included, those of us over age 65, we were raised to, be a bit stoic, keep it together, move on quickly. How do we give ourselves permission to grieve without feeling some guilt and shame over all of this?
I harken back to one of my favorite parts of the journalism I did was interviewing World War II veterans
Mm.
in great, great detail, and I saw the impact that buried grief had. And I saw it in my own family as well, but in these veterans, some of whom were in their 90s and had never spoken of what happened to them, what they witnessed, and they carried that with them, and the cathartic effect of releasing it really stayed with me, and I understood when this happened to me that I had to give myself permission to grieve fully, and, uh it was a decision someone else made, so it took time to gain perspective on the fact that I didn't need to have guilt or shame, although I felt both, and I felt like it was a tremendous failure on my part, but I came to understand with perspective, he wanted something different, and it really didn't have all that much to do with me, so I think time is your friend here in gaining perspective, but you also have to make a choice about, I I can go forward, bitter and closed, or I can work to integrate the grief into my life in a way that I can carry it forward without it being such a burden.
Of course, you're listening to the Not Old Better Show Art of Living interview series. I'm Paul Vogelzang, and we're here with Suzy Hopkins, half of the beloved mother-daughter duo with New Yorker illustrator Hallie Bateman, talking about their comforting, funny, and beautifully drawn guide, What to Do When You Get Dumped. In the first half, we talked with Suzy about the shock and the simple lifelines she offered. Eat something warm, step outside, phone a friend. Now let's shift to the next hard and hopeful part. Boundaries that protect your heart. Yes, even with the phone and the scroll, reclaiming your space and time, and the small rediscoveries that quietly rebuild a day. Stay with us. Before we wrap up, Suzy will share one do today step for anyone starting again at 50, 60, 70, or beyond. We'll be right back with the rest of our interview with Suzy Hopkins after this. The best money advice I ever got came from my father. He told me, it's not about how much you make, it's about what you keep and what you do with it. Back then, I didn't fully get it. I thought investing meant having big sums of cash and knowing all the stock market lingo. Honestly, I put it off for years because it felt too intimidating. But here's the thing. Good advice is one thing. Actually, putting it into practice is another. That's why I wish I'd had Acorns sooner. Acorns is the financial wellness app that helps you invest for your future, save for tomorrow, and spend smarter today, all without having to be a finance expert. You can start with something as small as your spare change. Every time you make a purchase, Acorns rounds it up and invests that change into an expert-built portfolio. So your money has a chance to grow wisely, not wildly. Whether your goals are a dream vacation, a first home, helping your kids or grandkids, or building a retirement cushion, Acorns makes it automatic. They even offer a checking account that invests for you and an emergency fund feature, all in one easy-to-use app. This is great stuff. What I personally love is the way Acorns removes the overwhelm. I don't have to study stock charts or second guess myself. I just set it, live my life, and let the process work in the background. Sign up now, and Acorns will boost your new account with a $5 bonus investment. Join over 14 million all-time customers who've already saved and invested more than $25 billion with Acorns. Head to acorns.com/NOB or download the Acorns app to get started. Paid, non-client endorsement. Compensation provides incentive to positively promote Acorns. Tier 2 compensation provided. Investing involves risk. Acorns Advisors, LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. View important disclosures at acorns.com/NOB. Our guest today is the wonderful author, Suzy Hopkins, who's written a fabulous book, What to Do When You Get Dumped. It's illustrated by Hallie Bateman, Suzy's daughter. Suzy is with us today talking about the book. We are so appreciative of your perspective and this wonderful book. And I want to talk to you about the illustrations in just a minute, but I want to ask you too about this idea of kind of moving on, just as a follow-up, because you do talk about, returning to who you are and this idea of kind of doing something that makes that makes you feel yourself wholly. And maybe that's a hobby, maybe that's picking up a hobby or returning to a hobby from a previous year. Talk to us a little bit about that and what that meant to you and how you went about doing that.
I guess I felt like I hardly knew who I was by the end of the marriage. I had, we had together had raised 3 children, and our lives were so entwined that I just no longer saw the things that were of most value to me. I couldn't readily say, well, this is what I love. This is because I felt like I was part of a unit that had its own sense of priorities and mission. And so I think part of it for me was I did a lot of journaling to identify, what do I really care about? What do I a lot of my time was spent, what kind of person do I want to be, not when I grow up, but when I grow through this experience. And I saw people who became very embittered by what had happened to them. And then I met people who had moved through, because in the end, it's a choice you have to make, right? About, you have X number of years. And I think the thing I have now is this tremendous perspective on the gift of time. And not wasting it. And yet when you feel lost and sort of abandoned and directionless, you really have to take some time to say, which direction do I go? What am I going to pursue? And part of that is saying, what do I value? And it came down to me is to spending more time doing things that were high value to me, which is now kind of my compass more than it was when I was, the value was going to work and creating your career and building your family.
Suzy Hopkins, our guest, has written this fantastic book, What to Do When You Get Dumped. The book is excellent. I just want to recommend it to our audience. I think everyone needs to read this and pay attention to this subject. Loss is part of our life, and the book deals with it being a guide to unbreaking your heart. I'm not the only one who likes the book, though, Suzy. I want to tell you a couple of reviews that I found that I just thought were really powerful. The actor Ali Sheedy said, "Beautiful, heart-wrenching, funny. I'll keep this book close till the day I need it and pass it to my son for the day he will." I thought that was a great review. The Los Angeles Magazine said, "Hallie Bateman and her mother have created a funny, beautiful guidebook that's simultaneously deeply personal and super universal in that it chisels to the core of how complicated and wonderful mother-daughter relationships are." Let's talk for a second about Hallie Bateman, your daughter,
Yeah.
one of 3 children. She's the illustrator of the book, and so that brings with it lots of powerful connection. But throughout all of this, Hallie was probably front and center to all of the hurt and observed all of the pain. I think seeing a parent go through pain, it must have been hard on her, hard on you at the same time. What do you have to say about that?
Oh, it's just was such a complicated mix, and she was grieving her own loss of the family. She thought the family was reconfigured entirely. She had to really redefine her relationship with her dad. It's very unusual. I see that you write a book about with your daughter about your husband leaving you.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I
Very.
get that. However, it never would have happened if we hadn't already done the first one and dealt with the topic of grief. And I think Hallie needed to move through her own grieving process and was able to maintain a sort of a bigger view, because she wasn't the writing the book for me was uh, actually very painful, because I had to remain, as I was healing, I had to remain in the memories of everything that was. For her, she was really able to help guide the book to become lighter, and we really both believe in specificity in writing, so it is very much of what I write about in the book is actually almost all of it has actually happened to me. If it's online dating, they're people I met online. If it's, the real hard days of grief, that happened to me. And so Hallie's involvement helped her come to grips with what the experience had been, and it really, as hard as it was for us to go through, it really strengthened our bond in a way that I would never have anticipated. So, as an illustrator, this is a graphic novel, which I'm not sure a lot of older people read as much as young people
Sure.
do.
Sure. Yeah.
But the graphic novel and her illustrating ability can convey emotion and the nuance of the characters in a way that just adds an extra impact. So it's very emotionally powerful. And a lot of our time was spent with her parsing away my words and saying, we're going to illustrate that. And really, really trimming and refining down to where it was the essence of the experience, with this beautiful color and emotional aspects of the characters that you can sit with and feel very differently than you were reading like 100 pages of text about grief. It's just so much easier to take in and to process in it. And there's a lot of emotional cross connections that I think the reader makes with illustration that don't happen when you're just with a straight, heavy textbook.
An example of that, I thought, and you probably have many, but one that I just thought was so powerful was music not to listen to and music to listen to. And I wonder, there's
That
some
was fun.
great, yeah, that must have been fun. Did you generationally?
Will your lawyer speak to God was one of my favorites.
Right, right.
Kitty
You've
Wells,
lost
I
that
think.
lovin' feeling, and Eric Carmen, All by Myself. Oh my God, I heard all those songs.
And the reason that was written that way was because I would hear a song and it would just dissolve me. And it's
Yeah,
the
yeah.
power of music to either lift you up or bring you down or take you back to a time and trigger memories, really. So all these things were part of the healing experience.
Of course, of course. Yeah, I just thought that was a wonderful illustration, and it just made
And she has one. There's so many of hers
yeah.
that are amazing, but um, she has one of a roller coaster, and the roller coaster it marks all the points in time when you, being newly dumped, come up against these emotional just earthquakes, and they're illustrated as drop points in the roller coaster where the character is just going to go on this awful ride. And so those are, the first anniversary, the time you see them out in public, and it's just feels terrible to you. And one was, my sister said, "Hey, I saw a picture of the woman online, and she kind of looks like you." And so all those are in the roller coaster, and Hallie's just able to bring this to life in a way that minimal words and maximal emotional impact, because it's very universal that grief doesn't take a holiday, and it comes back at times with that were meaningful to the person you shared a life with.
Yeah, and I found as I was reading the book and looking at the wonderful illustrations that you really have this attitude. I think it's lacking a little bit. It's a wonderful perspective about a respect that we we ought to have for this kind of loss. And a lot of people, I'm not sure, would even understand that and understand that we need to be allowed to feel broken. That certainly came out to me.
Yes, in fact, grieving has, I think, a bad reputation.
Hmm.
Grieving is something we need to go through to come I think, to learn whatever lessons we're here to learn. And I think you can try to pretend it doesn't exist or deny it, but it just comes back in different ways. People try to suppress it with drugs or alcohol. Well, none of that works. It just bites you in some other area of your life. And one thing that was very powerful for me early in the process was interviewing people who'd been badly dumped. And I interviewed a half dozen people who basically said it took years, years and years. Like I'd say, well, how long did it take before kind of joy came back in your life? And they would
Yeah.
say, oh, 6, 8, 10 years. And that was across the board. And some of them cried on the phone and I was on these cold call interviews. So obviously it's something that I understood. I think that's why I was just as vulnerable as I felt putting the book out. I felt like it was good to put out as a note of encouragement to other people that it does have an end date,
Hmm.
but it's you're signing on for it's a difficult journey through grief, but there's a lot you can gain, including compassion for other people who are going through different types of grief.
Yeah, most definitely. Any funny or strange advice that you got from some of these calls from anybody that offered you some advice?
Um, I got, I really, what resonates with me is when people tell me something that I know is the wrong thing to do. And
Yeah.
one woman described sitting in a chair for, I think she said for a year, because her husband had an affair with her best friend, and the best friend hid that from her as she listened to how difficult the difficulty she was having with their marriage. So the best friend was a liar, and this woman said she screamed and drank in her armchair at night for a year, and finally her boss said she had to knock it off, and she went on and found, you know, uh, a better life after, but it took her a long time. But screaming in the armchair while you're drinking probably wasn't good. And then another gentleman who was had a pretty amazing story told me about the value of making to-do lists for tasks. So just giving yourself the smallest assignments in the world, and that's in the book. And I was the list maker anyway, and I thought, well, that really worked for me. And it was giving yourself a lot of grace by saying, wake up today and, have a glass of water and call it good. And then maybe tomorrow you can take on another task. So not demanding too much of yourself when you're going through the hardest days. And sometimes you don't know when you get up if it's really going to come back, or you're going to be able to do more. So I think it's finding grace for yourself,
Mhm.
that you will get through this, but patience in the process and understanding that you're kind of coming back to whole, but in a different new life that you have some choice over.
Suzy Hopkins, just two more quick questions for you. I wonder, what do you say to somebody in their 50s, 60s, or 70s that just feels as though this is all too late? It's happening too late. I don't even know if I can start over.
The option is lying down and giving up, and that
Mm.
to me, if you paint very clearly the picture of I have 20, 30 years left to live, do I want to have those be miserable, non-joy filled years, or do I want to go in pursuit of what I hope is a better life? And it's a no-brainer to me. If you really look at it very objectively, you really only have those choices. And going forward with uncertainty is hard, but the fact is, that's the learning process, is embracing the fact that everything changes all the time, and we have to learn to adapt to that.
What a pleasure it's been to talk with you, Suzy Hopkins. I just have one final quick question for you. This is maybe a question best answered by Hallie Bateman, but we've gotten so much great advice from you. if Hallie were to draw the mascot for getting dumped, what do you think the mascot would be? What do you think she would illustrate that as?
Well, she loves the badger illustration in the book. For some reason, we're both, like, really charmed by the badger, and there's a page in the book, that talks about, um, people don't particularly respect badgers, and the fact is why don't we have more respect for badgers? And I think that the badger would be the mascot, and it's
Yeah.
all about finding respect for ourselves when we feel, the most, beaten down, I guess, and coming back to that point where we can see that our lives have value and meaning, no matter what age we are.
I kind of thought the badger represented a fighter spirit too, and just that idea of perseverance. So that's wonderful.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, good.
That's true.
Well, Suzy Hopkins, author of this wonderful new book, What to Do When You Get Dumped. It's fantastic. It's a guide to unbreaking your heart. Suzy, thanks for your time. Congratulations on this work. My best to you and Hallie and your family. You're just a real inspiration to us. Thank you. And as you do more work, please come back. I'd love to talk to you again.
Oh, thank you. It's just been a pleasure.
For me too. Thanks.
Thank you.
My thanks to Suzy Hopkins for joining us today on the Not Old Better Show Art of Living interview series. Suzy has been candid. She offers such wonderful wisdom, and the comfort of what to do when you get dumped was just excellent to hear from her about. The love she and her daughter, Hallie Bateman, continue to share throughout their work, including What to Do When I'm Gone, Suzy and Hallie's previous book. If today's conversation helped, you'll find more details, links to Suzy's books, and our full back catalog at notoldbetter.com. Of course, our episode today has been brought to you by Acorns. Please check out all that Acorns has to offer. Acorns is a financial wellness app that makes it easy to start saving and investing for your future at acorns.com/NOB. All of this will be in our show notes today. But you can catch all of our episodes, stories, anytime on our website and follow the show on social media. Twitter is at NotOldBetter. Instagram is at NotOldBetter. You'll find updates, clips, and our wonderful community there. This episode is a production of NOBS Studios. I'm Paul Vogelsang. Thanks for listening. Take good care of yourselves. Be well. Be better. Let's talk about better. The Not Old Better Show on radio and podcast. Thanks, everybody. Please join me again next time.